pleasure to welcome Ram Sundaram to this evening's session. I'll just give you a brief idea of his career profile. So Ram was a partner with Goldman Sachs Global Markets Division, and he was global head of trading in currencies and emerging markets, commodities, and the structured finance, investment, and lending groups. He was co-chair of Global Markets Investment Committee and Goldman Sachs Latin America. He also served on the Global Markets Executive Committee and the firm-wide Investment Policy Committee. He retired from the firm in 2021. Ram joined Goldman Sachs in 2001 as a vice president and founded and built the Principal Funding and Investments Group's PFI at Goldman Sachs, which had a significant financial footprint in the firm during the financial crisis of 2008. He was named managing director in 2005 and a partner in 2008. Prior to joining Goldman, Ram worked at Morgan Stanley for 6 years and at Merrill Lynch for 2 years. Ram serves on the board of directors of the Child Mind Institute in New York and is a member of the Dean's Council at New York University Tisch School of the Arts. He earned a BTech from the Indian Institute of Technology Madras course and an MBA from the University of Rochester. He and his wife Preeti have 2 children and they live in New York City. So it's an honor for me to welcome Ram again to this session, and I'm sure that it's going to be a very riveting session. And any questions you may have on a career in investment banking, he's definitely the right person to guide you. So have a great session on. Thanks.
Thank you for the introduction. I don't know if this is going to be riveting. I'm going to talk for some time about my career, what I did, and where I got to. And then I hope you guys have questions and we can have an interactive session rather than by just droning on. So let me start with why I gave this title, The Road to Success is like a New York City Avenue. Anybody who's been to New York knows that Manhattan is like a grid. So it's actually straight lines, the streets, the avenues. But if you've been to Manhattan recently, you would have noticed something else. The avenues are full of potholes. So yes, you can go from beginning to end. But along the way, you're going to hit a lot of potholes. With luck, you may avoid some of them. Others, you're going to get through. You just have to go through the potholes. And your car may break down on the way. You've got to reboot and start again. So that's how I think a road to success is. There is no straight line. There's no linear structure to success. There is a lot of non-linearity to how you get to success. And there are a lot of potholes. So that's what you're going to be navigating in your careers as you graduate IIT and move on. So let me start with luck. So my brother told me the story about my grandfather. His name was Rangayangar, and he grew up in British India in a small village in Tamil Nadu called Karakurchi. And in this village, I was told there was only one street lamp. And this man was very dedicated to his academics. So he used to sit under that one street lamp and study. And he studied, he educated himself, made himself a lawyer, and moved out of the city. Moved to the city. He moved to Madurai. My father eventually moved to Madras. And 100 years from when this man started under the street lamp, his grandson, me, became a partner at Goldman Sachs in New York. It is my luck that I had a grandfather who took the effort to go and study under a street lamp. If he didn't do that, I would have probably been still in that village. So that tells you the role of luck that you have in your life. The second piece of luck I had was getting into IIT. So I grew up in a family with a brother and sister who were both school toppers, college toppers. And then I was the youngest, and then there was me. I was not a great student, and starting the 8th grade, I learned the joys of the back row, and my grades plummeted. It came to the point where in 12th standard, second term, my mother sat with me and said, it's okay if we don't get into college. We have enough money, we can support you. And that's when I panicked. I said, I'm going to get stuck at home with these people. I better get out. I have to do something. For the next 6 months, I studied insanely, completely insanely, catching up with everything I had not done. And sheer luck, I got through JEE and got into IIT. It was a complete shock for everyone, in my family, in my school, everyone, that I actually got into IIT. So much so that the year following my getting into IIT, there was there was an old lab attendant in my school, Vidya Mandir, and there was this kid in the year following me who had done really well in his CBSE exams, and he was boasting to everybody that he got 100 out of 100 in math. And this guy comes up to him and says, "Hey, you're getting that 100 in math is like that Ram getting into IIT last year. That was the benchmark. That's where I came from." So anyway, I get into IIT. I didn't, again, academics was not a big priority for me in IIT. I made a lot of friends. We read a lot of books. We had great arguments. I enjoyed my 4 years, loved it. But I graduated, passed. I was one of the 5 point someones. I can say it now. And I had no idea what I wanted to do because my 4 years in IIT was so much fun, and now it was over and I had to do something. So my dad spoke to the chairman of Sundaram Fasteners and got me a job. So I joined as an engineer trainee. I don't know why they called me an engineer trainee, given I was not much of an engineer, but I joined as a graduate engineer trainee in marketing. And it was again luck shining on you, right? I'll tell you why. There was two things that happened because of my joining Sundaram Fasteners that stayed with me for the rest of my life. The first one was the chairman of Sundaram Fasteners, Suresh Krishna, was one of the most inspirational people I've ever worked for. I mean, I didn't work for him, I worked around 10 levels below him, but he was incredibly inspirational, and he would make these speeches. It was a small company still at that time, but he had this vision and this ambition about where everything was going to go, where he was going to go, how from 10 crores exports, you'll get to 200 crores exports. And he used to make these speeches twice a year to everybody in the company, where he would, elucidate his vision and talk about where things had to get to. And I could see how somebody, who leads a company could really get the people in the company impassioned, put impossible goals up there, but then convince everybody that that's where we need to go, and everybody starts moving towards that goal. And I learned that from him. I also learned this term which he used to use called MAFA. He used to say, "Don't MAFA," and MAFA stands for mistake activity for achievement. So he said, "Don't mistake activity for achievement." He says a lot of people who sit around, they look very busy, but they're not achieving anything. So if you do something, try to achieve something. Don't just do it for activity's sake. And that again stayed with me for the rest of my career. The second piece of luck was because I joined Sundaram Fasteners, I met my now wife, who joined as an intern. We were the only two interns in the company at that time. And we ended up working together in Sundaram Fasteners, and I fell in love, and I hope she fell in love too. And then, she decided she's going to go to the US to do an MBA, and I still had no idea what I wanted to do, but if she was going, I was going to go too. So I applied. Now, given my stellar GPA at IIT, it was not like I was going to go to one of the top schools. So she ended up going to University of Rochester, so I also went to University of Rochester to do my MBA with no plan other than I'll do an MBA, hang out with her, and then I'll come back to India. Maybe I'll get a job in the auto parts business. But when I was in Rochester, I read a novel. It's called Liar's Poker. And this was a book about bond traders and Solomon Brothers. And it was a riveting book, beautifully written, and I loved it. I mean, I like all of a sudden, look, I know what I want to do in my life. I want to be a bond trader at Solomon Brothers. I don't know what it actually meant, but it sounded really cool in that book. And now all of a sudden, no, forget auto parts, I'm going to Wall Street. The problem for me was I was in the University of Rochester. Nobody came there to recruit from Wall Street, right? They went to Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Caltech, whatever. I mean, Chicago, but not Rochester. But I had to get into Wall Street. This is what I wanted to do, and this is what I needed to do. So I wrote 400 letters. Those days you actually wrote letters. So I wrote letters. I mailed out 400 letters to people, telling them, please hire me. I sent them my CV and called them. And then, of course, that was not going to work on its own. So I set up meetings with people who I didn't know, but I got their names. And every Thursday I drove to New York. For the 6.5-hour drive from Rochester, I'd go to New York. I'd meet who I'd set up a meeting with, and I'd beg them for a job. And if they said they don't have a job, I'd ask them for the names of 2 or 3 other people they knew who I could then try and meet. And so that went on. For a whole year, all I did was single-minded, go into New York, kept begging people for a job. It was a recession in 91, so it's not like there were a lot of jobs available. People were getting fired. So in the end, I graduated Rochester and I ended up in New York City still unemployed. But again, luck was in my favor because one of my very good friends from Madras also moved to New York, and he managed to luck out by getting a rent-free apartment for 6 months. So we both could actually stay there even though we had no money. And I'll never forget, I had $17 left in my bank account, and I couldn't get it out because in New York City, the ATMs had a $20 minimum. And so they don't let you take out 17. And I had to actually find an ATM in Bronxville, New York, 45 minutes away, and go get my $15 out. So that's how we started. But because of all the networking, all of the things people had gone and met, and eventually somebody remembered me when somebody else was looking for someone to take a job. And I got to meet this guy, and I get a job. I got a job at UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland, around the same level as the guy sweeping the floor, but it was a job. So I was in foreign exchange trading. And I showed up at 6 a.m. I worked till 11 at night. It was really, really, really mind-numbing work. Entering all the trades, reconciling the trades, sending stuff overnight. And I got, and a big part of my job was to go get lunch for the traders. And they'd all give me the orders. I'd have to go, and they'll think of the furthest place they could send me to in the middle of winter, like Wendy's. They loved Wendy's because it was 14 blocks down. So I had to walk down to Wendy's, get all their orders, and if one order was wrong, go back. So I get through my 18 months. I become a dollar-yen trader at UBS, and again, the power of networking and meeting people. I had met a bunch of people at Morgan Stanley and begged them for a job in 91, but they had no headcount. By 93, they had a headcount. So when I went back in, they remembered me, and so I went through the interview process. I got a job in the derivative products group, which was a very, very prestigious group to join in Morgan Stanley at that time in terms of learning. The learning curve was very, very steep. And that had my career take off. The next 3 years was like a superstar track. I got promoted, I got paid. And it's a very entrepreneurial place because it wasn't like, you come in there and you had something fixed to do. In the first year, they taught me enough to go and sell structured notes. In the second year, that business died. You had to figure out for yourself what you're going to do next year. And for example, that year, I found some bonds in Mexico that had a very peculiar risk. They had a risk of, they were indexed to dollars, but they paid in pesos. So your only risk is whether you can convert your pesos to dollars, right? So the question is, how can I buy this protection? I had no idea where to start, but I said, okay, there has to be somebody who might want to sell that kind of protection. So I went and bought a book, the American Commerce Department Handbook of American Companies in Mexico. And I started dialing CFOs one by one and saying, hey, you already have workers there, you need pesos anyway, so I'll pay you 0.5% now. And if unlikely event it's inconvertible, you give me dollars, I'll give you pesos. 95% of the conversation ended after the first pitch. And then eventually 2 or 3 people said, let me think about it. Eventually, one of them ended up buying selling me the protection. Then we started buying up a lot of that protection. 94 was the year eventually that the Mexican peso blew up. It was in a band up till then, and then it blew up. So that protection we bought ended up becoming super valuable. So we did trades like that. We found trades. We found opportunities. We made money. And I got promoted. And then again, bumps start. 96. I get recruited to move to asset management, Morgan Stanley Asset Management, because one of my bosses had moved there. He said, you should come. I said, fine, well, whatever. I said, let's take some risk, go to a new place, start again. And we did extraordinarily well for the first 2 years because we were very entrepreneurial. There's just 3 of us. We got a business up and running. And I got promoted, I got paid, I did well. Hit 98, annus horribilis, breakdown. Because 98 was the year Russia defaulted. And our group was owned by the emerging markets group. And there was a fund in there that was very long Russia. I mean, it was levered long Russia. So he blew up. And he blew up. There was a big political battle between Morgan Stanley and Dean Witter, who Morgan Stanley had merged with. Collateral damage was the Morgan Stanley side. So all my bosses were fired. So it was just me. I was reporting to a guy from Dean Witter. It was not going to work out. So I had to leave. So I felt like I had this incredible career. I was walking on water, thinking I was on top of the world. Boom, just collapse, complete career collapse. And I had my father passed away the same month. So September 1998 was my annus horribilis. So I went through 3-4 months of depression. I was thinking like, okay, this career's over, dad's dead. What am I doing? When we just had a kid, and I was like, how am I going to provide? And then at that point, I remember telling my wife that, and she's like, just get it together and go figure it out. And she was right. I mean, after the first few months, I pulled my socks up and said, I'm going to start again. So I started interviewing around. I got a job at Merrill. I worked there for 2 years. Learned a lot at Merrill. I went back to the sell side. I went to the broker-dealer side, did Latin America derivatives. We did well, but I didn't really enjoy working at Merrill Lynch. So Goldman hired me in '01 to run a group called Repacks and Exotics in credit derivatives, which was a starting point of the whole credit derivatives business at that time. And again, my luck, I got hired September 3rd, 2001. September 11th happened 8 days later. After that, I wouldn't have been hired. I just managed to get in before that happened. Now, I thought, okay, now I've joined Goldman. I'm running these repacks and exotics. They'll tell me what to do, and I'll, what products I can take care of and so on. No one spoke to me. I had no idea. Really, I had no idea. Within credit derivatives, they had two big businesses, credit default swap trading. They had CLOs, and then there was us, repacks and exotics. Nobody knew what this group did. I was America's head. There was a global head, no P&L, no product, no idea what we were doing. So they gave me two guys and said, they work for you. And I had to fire one guy, so I kept the other guy. And then we said, okay, we have to survive. We have to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to make some money. So we wrote down 10 different ideas of what we thought we did. And we walked around the firm. I met every partner. I met everybody. We talked. Yeah, we can do this. We can do that. Just trying to see if anybody would take interest in anything we are saying, and hoping that through that something will happen, and then we can try to create something. And with these things, your first 7 of your 10 ideas don't work, and then 2 of your ideas work, and you think you're going to make some money, and then you get slapped. That's not your business. You can't do that. So okay. So then there's one thing we did. We made some money, and nobody said anything. We said, okay, we can do this. So let's quickly scale up before they notice that we are doing this. And we started, we had done something where we bought credit protections on bonds and financed it. Okay, it's not that complicated, but we made some money. And then we had to figure out how can we do more of this. So I said, let's call ourselves a prop desk, and we'll get covered by the street. We'll start buying things from outside. So we started doing that, and then we found really interesting trade in Mexico. We went and did that. So at the end of the first year, we made 30 million. And then we were like, wow, we survived, right? Because they're not going to fire us now. At least one more year, we bought ourselves by doing this. And I hired 2 more guys in 2003. January, February, March, April, May, nothing, or no P&L. So we're still at 0. And now the year is looking like, okay, this is the year we're going to get fired again. And we decided to go and find something in this. There was a conference in Berlin. So me and this other guy said, let's go to the conference. But we were very embarrassed to ask Goldman to pay for us to go because we made no money. So how could you go and ask them to send us to a conference? So we said, we'll gate crash. So we flew to Berlin, went to that conference, got thrown out twice by the guard, but kept sneaking in. And we went in, met everybody, morning 6 a.m. to morning 2 a.m. We met people, looked for something, looked for a trade, found 2 trades. Luck, came back, closed those trades. We finished that year at 40 million. So now, okay, 30, 40, not going to get fired again, 2003. 2004 comes along. We found some deals in 2003 that were Australian bonds that we bought. We made some money. I said, there's got to be more of this stuff there. Why don't we go there? So me and these other 2 guys flew to Australia. It was a very sleepy market at that time. And in 2004, Australia had a few banks that would dominate everything. And we saw that every bank was saying they lend 5 years. So we said, yeah, we lend 15 years just to see what will happen. So we went around meeting people, and we had some trades set up. We thought we were going to do these trades. We went and pitched them. The client said, yeah, we'll do that with you. When he came back, we thought we had all these great trades set up. Every trade, the clients turned around and gave it to Citibank to execute, saying that they gave our idea to Citibank to do because we had no presence there. We were only like a very small office. And then there was one trade that was so big, everyone thought it's undoable by just one bank. So it was like 50 banks were pitching to do this transaction. It was for Australia, Sydney airports. It was the biggest bond deal in Australia in 5 years. Because all of these people are competing, we thought it's too crowded, we don't want to be doing this. But every other deal died, so we had to figure out if we can do this somehow. And so we went, every bank told them that you can't do this in Australian dollars, it's too big. You have to go do road shows and try to sell it in euros and pounds and all this stuff. But we figured out an angle of what we could do with these bonds. And so I go to my boss and we went to the CFO and said, look, here's what I'm going to do. I think I can deal with this. I want to buy it. So it was actually, that was classic Goldman Sachs. We had a 20-minute conversation. I came back to my desk. I called them and said, I'll buy your whole deal now. 1.5 billion in Aussie dollars. Same price everybody's telling you. You're done. You don't need to worry about doing roadshow or anything. And they were shocked because everybody else was telling them this can't be done. So we ended up buying it. We got hit on the whole deal. And the whole market thought we're going to choke on it, we're going to lose money. And they were calling us and saying, oh, you want to sell it, I can buy it here from you and all this stuff. But we had come up with a very different angle than what anybody else had thought of. And what we did was we took these bonds and financed them in Canada because Canadian dollars was a very cheap currency to finance these bonds, which gave us a huge advantage in terms of where the price at which you own credit risk. And then we sold the credit risk into Europe. So we took a deal that everybody thought was very tight and we made a lot of money with it. Now that's an important lesson because this deal was one of the most dramatic statements at that time. So we took the biggest bond deal in Australia and we made a lot of money. So people in Goldman started paying attention. These guys are actually doing something, right? And I'll tell you why that's important. Because from the beginning, I used to kept going to the investment banking department and say, hey, our group can do this, our group can do it. They would never listen to us. But you start making a few dramatic statements. Then people think, oh, maybe I can talk to this guy. Maybe he may have something, right? So slowly, every year, persistence, you start seeing more things. So once we did that deal in Australia, we got the next 7 mandates in Australia. We dominated Australia. And then by the end of the year, everything became so tight, we left. We said no more Australia until everything blew up again in 2008. And we got 50, then we got to, and I always, remember I told you from Sundaram Fasteners days, he would say like, let's get to 200. I also used to have this insanity. I'd say, okay, we have to get to 100 first. 100, because I thought you would become somebody at Goldman Sachs, you made $100 million. But the problem is, by the time we got to $100 million, $100 million was not that big. You had to be 500 million to be somebody. So we were kind of, okay, we got to 100, but okay, nobody still cares about this stuff. So we had, at that point, realized that Goldman Sachs did not have financing on its own. We didn't have deposits, we didn't have any other stuff. So we'll go and buy our own financing. So I started buying up financing from European pension funds, insurance companies. Ended up buying 65 billion of financing between 04 and 06, which I kept. Why did we do that? Because the lesson from 98, when Russia blew up, I learned the most important thing you can own when things blow up is financing. So I kept a lot of it. I used it for parts of our business. And by 06, I started getting very worried about the markets because the crazy things that we were seeing from the other banks in terms of what they're selling, the ABS CDOs and other things. So I started buying a lot of credit protection. I started buying default protection against banks, monolines, insurance companies, against the mortgage index. And I bought a lot of it. And we bought so much that we ended up losing $40 million on those shorts in 2006. But the rest of our business paid. We made 185 million, and that's so we ended up at 140 instead of the 200 I wanted to get to. We ended up at 140. My boss was trying to find me to murder me, but I just avoided him by not showing up wherever he was for the last 2 months of the year. So we get through 06, and then 07 comes, and finally, thank God, the market cracks. And so we made 800 million in 07. And then 08, we were perfectly positioned because we were long financing, short credit, market blew up. So all our competition died. Every other bank was trying to sell assets. But we now had financing, so I could go and finance people. So we provided financing to CIT, to MetLife, to Sallie Mae, to all kinds of institutions as basically zero competition. And because we were short credit, the market blew up. We made a lot of money on that. So we made 1.9 billion in '08. So finally, we thought we arrived. So it was every day, every year until then, we sat with this paranoia that they're about to fire us. And because we were irrelevant, I had not joined some big established group. Like I was not in mortgage trading or commodities trading or currency trading. No, I was, for the first 5 years, my group was just called, first 3 years, my group was just called Ram's Group because nobody even knew what we did, and they didn't care. So at some point, I renamed the group PFI because I had to come up with some name because otherwise it was being called nothing. And that name stuck. PFI became the name of the group that we kept after that forever. And so once we hit the 1.9 billion, we were very short. Everybody was selling things. We knew we had to cover, so we went and bought everything we could find in the market. And just 1 week in December, we bought $7 billion of corporate bonds to start covering our risk and neutralizing our book again. And the government became our biggest competitor in 2009. They came and flooded the market with financing. So of course our funding was not valuable anymore, so we marked that down. But all these assets we bought obviously appreciated because we bought them very, very cheap. So we made another 1.5 billion in '09. So we went from basically this startup group that was dying year to year to year to year to finally arriving into Goldman Sachs. And PFI became a name now within the firm. Post that, I ended up, the group continued to do things. We made a lot of money in the European financial crisis in '11. Then I was given Latin America as my new business to take. And now when I looked at this Latin America, I was actually like, can't you find somebody who speaks Spanish or Portuguese? Why me for this business? When my boss said, no, you have to go do it. And the funny thing is, like anything you do, anything you take, you have to. We had a business where we didn't really want to go there. We sort of there. We stayed in New York and we traded with American counterparties for Latin American risk. So I said, there's a whole continent there. Why don't we go there and let's start looking to see what we can do, but not go do stupid things because we don't know people. We don't know which guy will pay us back, which guy will pay us back. Let's focus on what we know how to do. And which was, we can take very large, complex risks, and we had no problem structuring solutions for people and taking on complex risks, which is what we ended up doing because every single day we started looking for things. Finally, we found one transaction. And that transaction made like $150 million for us. So that was almost the P&L of Latin America at that time, one transaction. That helped us to sort of gave like a jolt of confidence to the business because until then everyone thought LATAM, it's like a backwater business for us. But I went and told my boss, look, we make this money in these big trades. Let's take the money and reinvest back into the business. Hire better and better people. So it's no longer stepsister business. We put our best people into Latin America eventually because we make the money and invest it into this. And that's what we did. And I had a lot of co-heads who worked with me from IBD through the 6 years that I ran it. By the time we left, the business was making $1 billion a year. From where we started, which was 200, right? But because all we did was just try to be Goldman Sachs somewhere else. That's all we did. And we just did it by continuously reinvesting into better people. And so after that, I took over global currencies, emerging markets. So I had a lot of different roles. I oversaw commodities from 18. And the structured finance lending business continued to grow. And by 21, I'm like, okay, this is 20 years. I can't do this anymore. So I jumped off. So that's my story. And I had some sort of a slide where I wanted to put down what I thought were through my career, these were the things that I always thought was the most important things that give you an edge. And I think when you go through your careers, you learn these things. Some of these things, we all make mistakes when we don't do these things. And then eventually we learn. So I just put down these sort of 20 points, 15 points, which I thought were very, very important for people's careers based on my career. I mean, you can take it for what it's worth. So that's basically it. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions or do anything else. you guys want. Yeah, I'm happy to answer anything you want. I think in IIT you learn very good analytical skills. Right? It's always given that you're smart, you've gone through IIT, or you have analytical skills. EQ is really important in business, and I think that's the one thing as part working as part of teams inside IIT will be very helpful to you. I'll tell you one other thing that I think that I always used to tell people this. We assume you're smart. We assume that you can count and you can do math. That's what you need to do basic finance, right? The only thing nobody can teach you is hunger. Hunger is either you have it or you don't have it. And I've hired people who are like unbelievably smart, went nowhere because they just didn't have hunger. And I've hired people who are not that model of people that in the same league, but my God, just pure hunger got them much further.
So, so when you were in US, you were almost broke, right? At
Yeah.
one point. If you came back to India, you can live a well-off life, right?
No, but I had a dream. I wanted to work in Wall Street. So I said, I'm going to stay there and I'm going to figure it out. And that's why if you are passionate and you're hungry and you're going to go after it and somehow get it, you will get it always. You just have to follow your passion.
Hi, sir. Thanks a lot for sharing your inspiring story. So, having decades of trading experience in one of the biggest financial institutions of the world, so you have seen this industry in and out. So, what suggestion would you give to an individual retailer who might want to start trading? Should that person remain out, or should that person be think of competing, because that person might be competing with institutions like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. So, would you suggest the retailer to stay out of this game, especially derivatives?
It's a complicated question because I'll tell you why. There are some people who are just so talented, they actually do okay. Odds are that you're probably better off taking a job in in a place like Goldman and learn, because you'll get an incredible foundational learning. And I think that's one of the other really important things in life. When you leave here, don't think about prestige as the reason why you're going to take a job. Take a job that has a really steep learning curve where you learn something. And prestige doesn't matter because you will any job which has a steep learning curve, you're going to learn something, and that is going to be way more useful than having had some prestige.
In your career, you might have taken a lot of risks. And so, how do you gauge, like, when do you pull out of a risk when you think that you will be losing more than gain? So, how do you take the decision?
That's a great question, right? Because the most important thing that we always used to start with is sizing, right? That's why I wrote "Don't bite more than you can chew," because it is the single most important thing that you do when you take risk is sizing. If this doesn't work out, it can't be that not only is your business dead, but like 5 other businesses next to you are also going to get fired because of what happened here, right? So you start with sizing. Then your paranoia, you think about all of the different scenarios that can happen, right? So we used to say, okay, because your mindset says, okay, this is going to happen, therefore I'll do this. But it may not happen, this may happen. So you want to think through all of those different scenarios that may happen and size your position such that if this happens, you're still okay, but this happens, I'm going to make money. And then you reevaluate the next day and the next day and the next day, because you had an assumption why you did this, why you're going to make money, and the assumption could be wrong. And the assumption is wrong because your P&L is going down. You're losing money. Sometimes you look at it and say, well, actually, I like it even more. Rarely, but you would do it. But sometimes you say, no, you are wrong. Cut it. And so you stop loss out of the position. Yeah.
Like the smartest Indians IITs are going into management consulting and investment banking, when they don't have any foreign education. So your take on this and how much is the degrees which you completed helping your career future?
I don't think, look, I mean, we hired people who did BA in art history, right? It didn't really matter. I mean, assuming that, okay, you have to have some quant skill. That's no, that you can't do without that, obviously. But assuming you have some quant skill, honestly, 90% will be taught to you on the job. It's an apprenticeship system, right? You'll have people, you want to work next to somebody, they will start learning from them. Now, in today's world, if you're joining investment banking, more likely than not, they are going to interview you on seeing if you have a basic understanding of cash flows and things like that. But on the trading side, we didn't care that much. We cared more about hiring people who were really smart and really hungry. And then the rest we could train them. They pick it up.
You have seen several institutions, right? So you spoke about traits which are like drive success. On the contrary, what are some of the character traits or what are the character traits which are very limiting, which you think people should definitely avoid in
I mean, I think in the first slide I had things like, be aware of yourself, right? I mean, I think that's very important because every time you call somebody, you talk to somebody, you are writing that put option on your reputation. And it will get exercised against you, right? If you are not careful in what you say, how you say it, who you're talking to, you will limit your career just automatically just because you wrote that put option unnecessarily. So every time you pick up the phone, every time you meet somebody, every time you go to a meeting, think you're writing that put option. How do you want that to be perceived, right? Because all you need to do is write 2 or 3 bad put options, and reputationally you end up in a bad place.
Sir, there was a
Sorry.
there was a recession in 1991, and now also we are heading to a similar kind of time. So, what should be the strategy, or what are your suggestions to students who are going to head out and search for job in the coming year?
I think, look, I mean, if you're talking about within India, there's obviously India is booming. I've never seen anything like this in terms of how well India is doing. Now, we live in an uncertain world. Today, everything looks good, right? We don't know how things are going to be 6 months or 12 months from now because the US has taken on a lot of debt. So has Europe. So has Japan. There is a possibility that rates end up going much higher than where they are right now, which creates a big recession, and that eventually comes into India as well. There's also, we live in probably one of the most dangerous times geopolitically in the world. There's too many flashpoints where things can go horribly wrong. So those are the negative sort of possibilities. I don't think there is a right job or a wrong job to take. Follow your passion in terms of taking a job, and if you don't have any idea, like I didn't have any idea in 1988, try to join a first class company. It doesn't matter what you do. Even when people used to join Goldman, I used to tell them, it doesn't matter what exact job you want, that you got. You join a first class company, you will learn how to do business in a first class way. It doesn't matter what exactly that business is. Because people very often get caught up with, wow, that's so sexy. This is the greatest thing to work in right now. And I always used to tell people Wall Street is like riding a wave. When the wave is cresting is when it looks the best. It looks super sexy. It's where you want to be. And usually it's about to crash, right? So people used to go and join these fields which they thought was like the field to be in right now at exactly the wrong time. You want to catch the wave when it starts and ride it, and then jump off before it falls. That's a better strategy to. So don't get caught up with what other people think is hot or is like the hottest place to be right now.
One more question. So, till what age, after leaving college, can we take illogical risk? What I mean by illogical risk is not taking high-paying jobs and instead going for the things where we have a better learning curve, and basically prioritizing learning over money. So, till what age should we keep doing that?
I don't think there's a single formula for that. It depends on you and depends on where you want to get to. I think I've never thought age is a limiting thing. It's you can take risk till you're 80 years old. Nothing changes.
how did you even convince your team that, like, always they expect you to be at their back? I mean, like, how did you convince them that you are a proper leader? I mean, like, you can guide them and like.
Yes, it's a great question, and my success in Goldman Sachs was all about that. What I was very lucky in the quality, in the incredible talent I managed to hire. So it just happened in 2003. There was a guy called Ganesh Ramani who was looking for a job, and had been in GE and something else. And one of my friends who he was with and I recommended him to me, and I hired him. I said, look, I don't know, I'm taking a bet. I'm going to pay you $100,000, and if it doesn't work out, I'm going to fire you in a year. And I hired him on that basis. And this guy was just incredible. I mean, incredibly smart, and he made such a huge difference to my group. And then he became partner 2 years after me at Goldman. Then I hired this guy, this Persian guy, who's probably the smartest guy I ever worked with in my life. And this guy came from MIT, double degree, after immigrating from Tehran, where he won the International Physics Olympiad. And this guy would sit at, he never went home. He was said work all the time, to the point where my boss said, go and check if he has an apartment because he seems to be sleeping on my couch. And I found out later that it's because his only worry in life was that I was going to fire him and they'll deport him back to Iran. And so he used to sit there and work like crazy. But the breadth of processing power in his brain was incredible. Now, how do you motivate people, right? It's a great question to ask. People always want to know that you have their back. There's two things. When you hire really smart people, you don't want to control them. You want to let them loose, because that's where you get the leverage. You get that leverage from letting these incredible people loose, but you tell them you have their back. So they know anything went wrong, I'd say it's on me. It's not on him, it's on me. I take the bullet, it's fine. But obviously you are overseeing it. You know what they're going to do. They come to you, you're ultimately going to approve the trade risk and everything else that's going to happen. But you let them loose. And they love nothing more than being given that liberty to go and do what they can do, and know that you have the confidence in them, and you have their back.
Considering the fact that as engineers we're all kind of quantitatively driven.
It's a great question, right? I mean, when I joined foreign exchange trading, Goldman Sachs would have 40 traders in trading foreign exchange. By 2015, we had one. By 2020, we had like half. The computer did all the trading. And so the same thing happened with government bond trading. This is happening in every industry. This is nothing unique to Wall Street, right? I mean, as technology improves and improves and improves, it can take over a lot of the roles. So yes, a bunch of roles in Wall Street will disappear, and they have to disappear. It's a good thing. It's part of progress. But there is also the human element to Wall Street, right? I mean, IBD is about having a relationship. They think they can actually trust you. When the CEO of this company, the CFO of the company wants to trust you, they have a relationship with you. And that is not going to get taken over by a computer. Now, a lot of the work that those people do for them behind the scenes may get taken over by a computer. The computer can basically sort through all of the different targets for an M&A and distill it down, and then look at what is the most likely target that would probably work for this particular company. Things like that. Yes, tech would take over. That used to be done manually and will now get done by tech. But there is still the people and personal relationship angle that will not go away. So it will be fewer people, but there will always be the personal relationship part. And I don't think, and it's also exaggerated how fast all of this is going away. I think there is going to be still a run.
First of all, I want to thank Ram for a wonderful talk. Let's give him a nice round of applause. All of you one day will become alumni of IIT Madras, hopefully. Right? Fingers crossed, you're all going through the system well, you'll become an alumnus. That's not that difficult. What you heard today is what it takes to become a distinguished alumnus of IIT Madras. Ram is a distinguished alumnus of IIT Madras from the class of 2023. And it takes, several millions of students vie to get into IIT to one day become an alumnus. And out of the 53,000 odd alumni that we have, there's only about 120 distinguished alumni. Okay, so let's give a round of applause to somebody who was broken trails in a business that's very difficult to break trails in. You saw someone, none of you have been in New York in the early 90s. The early 90s was not exactly a good place on Wall Street for Indians to be. Today it is, thanks to people like Ram. So, and several others that sort of broke the trail for all of us. Goldman Sachs certainly didn't hire in 1992 when I graduated out of IIT Madras. Whereas today, they're a fixed point on our placement calendar, thanks to people like him. So I think there's more to what Ram and people like Ram have done for India at large, and certainly IIT in a big way. Okay, so those of you in the audience, I know, like I said, there's about a 1 in 500 chance that one of you will become a distinguished alumnus. Look at the ratio, right? So I expect several of you to have careers like him. We all wish you do well, and we all wish you learn from people like Ram. That's after all what your alma mater is all about, to provide you the opportunity to listen to leaders like Ram that will let you take a shortcut in learning life lessons. Okay, thank you very much again, Ram.